Hey dancers, welcome back to our channel. My name is Julie and I'm the owner and one of the instructors here at Broche Ballet, a ballet school for adults in Denver, Colorado. Today I want to talk a little bit about how to remember choreography. This is a question that we get a lot from people, especially beginners, but it could be anyone all the way through advanced dancers, of how do I remember what is going on when the music actually starts. I have a few tips for you today on how to remember choreography, but I want to start off by saying that it is something that we all struggle with. I like to think when you're starting off with ballet, ballet is like a total foreign language. Not only is it in French, which for many of us is not our first language, but the actual vocabulary, the steps, what they are, how to do them, what foot you're on, where your weight is, all that stuff is also part of what I consider the vocabulary. So how I like to think about this is like if you try to remember a paragraph in Spanish, let's say you don't speak Spanish and someone said, I want you to memorize this sentence or this paragraph in Spanish, you probably would have a really tough time with that. But if someone says, I want you to remember a paragraph in English or a sentence in English, you probably had a fighting shot at actually doing that. You can probably recite it back, you remember a lot of different things, it's much more manageable. So as you get more comfortable with your ballet vocabulary, it's going to become easier and easier for you to remember strings of what I would call words. Like a glissade would be a word, but it's also a step, or a waltz turn would be a word, but it's also a series of steps. So as you get better with these vocabulary pieces and building blocks, it's going to be much easier for you to start building them on top of each other. So don't worry too much if in the beginning everything seems like it's a whole other language, because it is not only in the actual language itself, but in how your body interprets it and how everything flows from your brain into your body. So let's talk a little bit about how you can keep building this skill as you build your ballet technique. First off, I want to talk about understanding the choreography itself. So in order to memorize it and to remember what's going on, you have to understand why it's happening. So an example of this is if you're standing in a coupe back, you have only a few options of what you can do in the center. You can do maybe a pas de bourrée, you could maybe do a glissade, you could do a couple of different things, but the steps have to actually fit together as a puzzle. You're probably not going to go from a coupe into a saut de chat. You're probably not going to go from a coupe into a pirouette. Not that you never will, but it's unlikely that you're going to do these things. So you can start to understand how these pieces fit together, and if you're standing here, what could possibly come next? Or if you just finished a glissade, what could possibly come next? So that can help you narrow down the realm of what might be after whatever step it is that you're doing. The next thing I want to talk about is finding patterns in the exercises. So in the beginning, it can seem like the teacher just told you 100 different things that you need to do, but in reality, for the most part, there's probably only 10 different things that you have to do, and you're going to do them 10 times. So you really want to start looking for patterns in the movement so that you can boil it down to fewer things to remember. We can't remember that many things. Like you can't remember 100 different things all at once, especially if the teacher just told it to you 2 seconds ago and now it's time for you to do it, and then your body has to do it as well. So you need to figure out how to get to a point where you can remember fewer things and not all 100. So for example, if the teacher says tendu front, tendu side, tendu back, tendu side, you can start boiling that down to tendus en croix, which means in the shape of a cross, front, side, back, and side. In ballet, we do most things en croix. At the bar especially, we'll go front, side, back, and side. Sometimes there's variations on that. You might switch legs or you might do it a little bit differently, but these are sorts of patterns that you can start boiling it down. So in that case, we just went from having to remember 4 things, tendu front, tendu side, tendu back, tendu side, to remembering 1 thing. We're going to do a tendu en croix. So you want to start figuring out how to boil these different things down into bigger chunks that you can remember. So Adagio, I think, is one of the hardest places to remember this because the combination can be very long. It doesn't often repeat as much, but you can boil it down into smaller things. For example, if the teacher gives you a développé front, développé side, développé back, and then maybe a promenade, you can think about that as an almost en croix. So you get really close to en croix, except instead of the last side, you're going to stick a promenade in there instead. So that lets you think about 1 thing with a replacement in it. So you don't have to remember front, side, and back, and then the promenade. You can just think about, well, I'm going to do these almost a whole set of en croix, and then I'm going to stick something else there instead. So you want to really start to find patterns in what's going on and try to boil it down in that regard. Next, I want to talk about how you can start practicing this stuff at home. When you get home from class, the first thing you should do is try to write down the things that you did in your class. You should try to write down a few of the bar exercises, you should write down a few of the center exercises. Even if you can't remember all of it, that act of trying to come up with it and remember the order is going to be really helpful for you to get more comfortable with how these patterns work and how it all fits together. So for example, if you're trying to remember your petit allegro and you're thinking, I know there was a jeté in there somewhere, but I'm not sure what came before it. Maybe you write jeté, and then you're not sure what came before or after it. You're pretty sure there was a pas de chat in there, so you write that down as well. And then you try and think back and put together the pieces of what you can. If you don't get all of this the first day of class, that's totally fine. But tomorrow when you go back to class, knowing that you're gonna write all this stuff down, you'll be a little bit more likely to try and remember it as you're doing it, because you know you have to remember it all the way until tonight, not just for this next 2 seconds. So really practice regurgitating what you did in class when you get home. Then you'll have this really cool binder at the end of all this with all the exercises that you did. You can use those for practicing, you can use those for studying, you can use those for all kinds of things. I also want to talk a little bit about when you're at home, you can think about 2 more things. You can think about making up your own combinations first off. So if you want to think, well, Adagio is definitely the hardest thing for me to remember. Okay, great. Try to make up an Adagio. Try to think about what pieces you could possibly put in Adagio. What things does your teacher normally throw in there? Are there turns, are there waltzes, are there développés, are there promenades? And then try to construct your own so you can think about how all this actually gets made, so that you can, when you get to class, you can maybe understand and say, oh right, promenade, that usually comes after when you're in arabesque, because we usually promenade in arabesque and it usually takes us to the other side. And those sorts of things will help you understand the patterns if you start making some up yourself. Even if your combinations are super simple, only 8 counts or 16 counts, it doesn't matter. Just make a few things up so you can start to get a feel for how someone makes up an exercise. Last thing here is to really watch other people's videos and try to pick out the steps that they're doing. So try to watch someone around your level if you can find like a beginner follow along online, or people posting on Instagram of videos of themselves doing combinations in class, and see how many of the steps you can pick out. If you can't pick them all out, that's totally fine, but you can at least try to pick out a few of them. This is gonna, again, help you really see how the pieces fit together, and then try to understand it from a different level, which is to see it happening and then see what those steps actually are without knowing what they are to begin with. So maybe you watch a turning combination, you see them do a waltz and a tombe pas de bourrée. You're gonna start to see this footwork in action, and then you have to be the one to slice it up to see where the pieces start and end. In your mind, a waltz, balancé right, balancé left, tombe pas de bourrée to fourth, and then a pirouette, all that stuff sounds very distinct because I have distinct words for them that have spaces between them. But when you actually see it all in a combination, it's much more fluid than that. So you want to be able to develop the skill to look at a combination and actually slice all that up yourself. When you're learning a new language, it's the same thing too. It can sound like people are talking really fast. It can sound like all the words are running together. That all happens until you actually know what those words are, and then you can pick them out individually. So this, watching videos of other people doing it, is going to really help you develop that language. That's all for today, dancers. I hope this helps you understand choreography so you can have a lot more fun in your ballet classes and feel less lost. Let me know in the comments below which of these tips helped you, or if you're still totally lost and you need some more help. Until next time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Take care.